You know, in any kind of research, whether it's a simple survey or some massive, years-long experiment, there's this hidden danger that we don't talk about enough. And it's not about the complicated math or some fancy theory. It's about people. People who just disappear. They drop out, they stop answering calls, and when they do, they might just take the truth with them, leaving all our conclusions completely wrong.
And that's the central mystery we're going to unpack today. What happens when the most important clues, the real story, is hiding in the evidence you can't even see? We're going to dig into a landmark study that ran smack into this problem, and in solving it, well, they changed the rules of research forever.
To really get why this was such a big deal, we have to go back in time, back to the 1970s, to an era of these incredibly ambitious social experiments. Our story starts with what looked like, on paper at least, the perfect setup.
Our investigation really kicks off right here, with this paper from 1979 by Hausman and Wise. And you gotta understand, they weren't just trying to fix a tiny statistical glitch, they were asking a much bigger question. How can we trust any of our results when our test subjects keep vanishing?
Okay, so the stage was set by one of the biggest policy questions of the time. If the government just gave people a guaranteed income, a basic safety net, would everyone's motivation to work just evaporate? I mean, billions of dollars in the future of social policy were riding on the answer. They absolutely needed to get this right.
So they designed what everyone considered the gold standard, the perfect tool for the job, a randomized controlled trial. In what was called the Gary Income Maintenance Experiment, they took a bunch of families and randomly put them into different groups. Some got a guaranteed income, and one group, the control, got nothing. The idea was to just track everyone over time and get a clean, unbiased answer. I mean, it was a flawless plan. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, it turned out that this perfect experiment had a huge crack running right through its foundation. Something was happening that nobody fully accounted for, and it threatened to bring the whole thing crashing down.
People started leaving. They just dropped out, they stopped reporting their income, and they effectively vanished from the records. And the really critical question wasn't just how many people left, it was who was leaving and why.
And here it is. Here's the number that should set off alarm bells for any researcher. In the group of black males in the experiment, over a third, 35.2%, disappeared from the study. This wasn't a small leak in the boat. The hull had a massive hole in it.
So, this is where the real trouble begins. Because when that many people leave, you have to start asking yourself, are the people who are left behind still a good representation of the original group? The answer, as it turns out, reveals a deep, unseen bias.
Okay, so here's the absolute key difference. If people drop out for random reasons, like maybe they move across the country for a family issue that has nothing to do with the study, you lose some data for sure. But your overall result isn't really skewed. It's a nuisance. But what if the people who find an amazing new job and see their income shoot up are the ones who decide they're just too busy to stay in the experiment? Well, suddenly your data has lost all its high earners. That's non-random attrition. And it's not a nuisance, it's a disaster. It completely contaminates your results.
And this disaster, it has a name: attrition bias. It's the systematic error you get when the group that sticks around to the end is no longer a random sample of the group you started with. The people you're left with don't look like the original population anymore, and your findings become totally unreliable. This quote from the paper just nails it. The initial randomization, the entire foundation that made the experiment credible in the first place, was now broken. The group that remained wasn't a random sample. They were just the survivors. And that selective survival meant any conclusions drawn from them could be completely, totally wrong.
So, what do? How do you possibly fix a problem this fundamental? You can't just pretend it didn't happen. This is where the sheer genius of Hausman and Wise comes into play. They decided to look at the missing data not as a failure, but as a puzzle that they could solve.
Their big breakthrough, their aha moment, was to stop thinking of dropouts as just a data cleaning problem. They realized that the decision to stay in the study or to leave it was itself an economic choice, a human behavior you could actually model and understand, just like anything else.
So their approach was really ingenious. Think of it like this. They built two models at the same time. The first one is what you'd expect, a model trying to predict people's earnings. But the second one, and this was the key, was a model trying to predict the decision to drop out of the study. They figured there had to be some hidden factor, let's just call it ambition for now, that might influence both a person's earnings and their decision to leave. By estimating both of these things together at the same time, they could mathematically isolate and just remove the bias that was being created by the people who disappeared. Their entire conceptual leap, this whole brilliant idea, really just boiled down to this one powerful sentence. The missing data are not missing at random. It was a signal, not just noise.
And this wasn't just some clever, one-off fix for one single study. What they created was a new standard of rigor that would send ripples through the entire field of empirical research.
Which, of course, brings us to the real moment of truth. Was all this complicated work actually necessary? Did correcting for this bias really change the final conclusion about whether a guaranteed income made people work less?
Well, let's just look at the evidence. As you can see right here, the simple analysis, the one that just ignored the whole dropout problem, was way off. It was substantially biased. But when Hausman and Wise applied their correction, the true effect finally emerged, and they found that yes, the guaranteed income did have a small but significant negative effect on earnings, reducing them by about 8%. The bias was literally hiding the real story. So yeah, it mattered. It mattered a lot. The attrition bias was actively covering up the true impact of the policy. The simple, uncorrected, and seemingly straightforward analysis was just plain wrong.
And the legacy of this one paper is just massive. I mean, before them, researchers might just make a little footnote about people dropping out. After them, it became a central issue. Today, any credible study has to report its follow-up rates, test to see if different groups are dropping out at different rates, and run checks to see if this kind of bias is a problem. The standards we all take for granted today, they were built on the foundation this paper laid.
Ultimately, I think their work served as this powerful lesson in humility. It taught an entire generation of researchers that data is fragile. You can have the most beautifully designed, gold standard experiment in the world, but if you don't pay close attention to who is disappearing from your sample, your results can end up being completely meaningless.
And that leaves us with this one kind of lingering question, doesn't it? If a bias this huge could hide in plain sight in one of the most carefully designed experiments of its time, what other truths might be lurking out there in the shadows, hidden away in all the data we never get to see?